It's crazy to think a decade ago, this team was looking to become an NFL dynasty, almost having a perfect season, and now they're the laughingstock of the NFL. Not to mention, their quarterback play last year isn't giving them anything to look forward for next year. In this video, we'll be going over the 10 points throughout this team's past couple of seasons that has led to their downfall. And it's crazy that one Super Bowl upset, not even that. How about one play in particular can change the whole course of an NFL franchise? To the fans of this team, I'm sorry, but the glory days are far behind us and they aren't coming back anytime soon. The Carolina Panthers were starting to look like the team to beat for years to come, but that was short-lived thanks to a Peyton Manning farewell tour. At number 10, we have holding on to Ron Rivera for too long, and look, Ron Rivera had an amazing season in 2015, but this season will become so overrated in Rivera's career that people actually still consider him to be a top coach in the league for years to come, even though he hasn't done anything since 2015. Nothing against Rivera, he's an amazing human being with an awesome story beating cancer, and he's an amazing leader of men. But his coaching days are way far behind him, and his tenure in Washington proved this. He was too loyal to players and coaches, holding them for way too long, and this set back having a Super Bowl winning roster for years. At number 9, I have them failing to build and replace pieces from that 2015 to 2016 roster. First off, take a look at the weapons Cam Newton had during his MVP season. You're telling me he was doing all of this with Ted Ginn Jr. as his wide receiver 1 with 739 yards and old man Greg Olsen holding up the fort with 1,100 yards and 7 touchdowns? This man was a hard carry this season. Also, there are a lot of key pieces from that defense that either faded off or retired, like Kuechly, who we'll get to later in this video. An underrated piece of this defense was defensive tackle Quan Short, who would have 11 sacks this season, and after being franchise tagged in 2017, having a slump season in 2016, he'd battle injuries and be eventually out of the league in 2020. Jared Allen, who is a legendary defensive end, while having minimum production this season, would retire after the season, and Thomas David would leave this team in 2019 for Washington. Charles Tillman was still putting in the work at age 34, and star corner at the time, Josh Norman, would leave this season after not getting a contract from Carolina, and he would go to Washington as well. Okay, what is up with this Carolina to Washington pipeline? At number 8, we have the Panthers' negligence to build an offensive line. Look, Bryce Young being put in the worst situation in football is no secret, and we'll get into more depth in this later. With that, however, comes with the fact that his offensive line help has been putrid, and overall, the Panthers haven't had a good offensive line in what seems to be years. We all know that football games are won in the trenches, and having a strong offensive-defensive line is key for rebuilds, especially in O-line when you're going to draft a rookie quarterback. Just watch the Panthers tape from this season. It felt like Bryce was running for his life the moment the ball was snapped. It doesn't help that this guy is shorter than Kyler Murray as well. You have the building pieces with Ikema Kwanu and Taylor Moton for this upcoming season. Bradley Bozeman, who was just released, was just not a scheme fit for the Panthers, as he was athletic enough for their zone gap scheme, and the rest of this O-line is just as useless as mall security. At number 7, we have the Panthers' questionable draft choices ever since the post-Cam Newton rebuild phase. We all know to be a successful franchise in the NFL, you have to build through the draft. But the Panthers have been getting consistent top picks in the draft, and they have nothing to show for it. It's getting concerning. Let's go over some draft busts they've had since 2019. In the second round of the 2019 draft, the Panthers would draft Greg Little, which didn't work out for them. And in that same draft, they took a chance on West Virginia quarterback Will Grier, which also was just a waste of a draft. In 2021, they drafted Terrace Marshall, who hasn't seen much time at all in the league. In 2022, the Panthers would draft Matt Rhule in the 3rd round, who was a very successful college quarterback, but he fell on the Panthers depth chart with that many QBs, and he would eventually be released. At number 6, we have the very questionable offseason trades and signings. On top of the Panthers' subpar drafting, the Panthers have made some moves that just shook everyone's heads. Let's start out with signing Teddy Bridgewater to a 3-year, $63 million contract, who they eventually traded Denver the following season. Look, this never made sense to me because throughout his time with the Saints, he was always a backup quarterback, and he hasn't started a season since 2015, and now you're going to give him $20 million a year to be the starter. Make it make sense. Next up, we have the replacement for Teddy Bridgewater with Sam Darnold in the 2021 offseason. Darnold would go 4-7 as his starter in his first season as a Panthers quarterback, and in the next season, he'd go 4-2, but they'd eventually move on from him in the 2023 offseason. The Panthers traded away a 6th rounder in the 2021 NFL draft, along with a 2022 2nd and 4th round pick. And the experiment overall just didn't last long, and in the season that Darnold did play for them, there was really nothing to write home about. Next, and the most franchise-altering trade, came when the Panthers traded up for the 1st overall pick to select quarterback Bryce Young. Like said before, I am not going to write off Bryce Young at all, and I loved him as a prospect, and I still do as a quarterback in this league. However, giving up 2 first-round picks was very questionable. And then you give up franchise cornerstone DJ Moore. Man, the DJ Moore part, honestly. Personally, if you were to draft a rookie quarterback, you don't want to give up your best receiving threat. And on top of giving up DJ Moore, the Panthers didn't do much to help out Bryce Young in his first year. We had old man Adam Thielen as his best weapon. Jonathan Mingo, while granted is a rookie still, didn't do much, and signing DJ Chark didn't pan out either for the Panthers. Bryce Young was easily put in the worst situation in football, and the Panthers are starting to feel the consequences now. Finally, one of the more notable terrible offseason moves was signing former Eagles running back Miles Sanders to a 4-year deal, who would eventually just be replaced by 3rd-year running back Chuba Hubbard. Just an overall disappointing signing on top of just a waste of capital for the Panthers. Panthers. At number 5, we have the hiring of Matt Rhule. First off, I'm going to hold myself accountable here. I thought this was an amazing hire at the time, and I fell in love with his introductory presser. And if you haven't watched it, go check it out because you'll see what I'm talking about. However, it just didn't work out the way Carolina and Rhule wanted. He's a great culture guy, reviving Baylor and Temple previously before heading into the NFL. And it seems like he never lost the locker room either during his tenure in Carolina. Like many college coaches who make the move to the NFL, the transition is rough, and if they don't adapt in time, their time can be quick. During Rhule's time in Carolina, the Panthers were always up there as the most penalized team in the league. Also, it seems that this team never had an identity under Rhule and could never decide if they wanted to rebuild or not. Matt Rhule kept emphasizing the process like the 76ers, but the team would make midseason trades like trading for CJ Henderson and Stephon Gilmore midseason 2021. In the season, while granted they were 3-0 at the time, seemed to be a rebuild year. The most embarrassing thing though is that after trading away Christian McCaffrey in 2022 and firing Rhule, Steve Wilks would become the interim coach and finish the season with a 6-7 record, which they choose not to retain for some reason. At number 4, we have the constant revolving door at quarterback. It's no secret that the Panthers have had trouble finding quarterbacks since Cam Newton's shoulder injury. And even though there's room for excitement with Bryce Young, it still hurts seeing your squad have the worst record in the NFL and not be drafting first overall, along with the fact that the quarterback that was drafted right after, being CJ Stroud, absolutely lit up the league with one of the greatest rookie seasons we've seen in a while. The quarterback moves began with Kyle Allen in 2019, who at first gave some life to his offense. He played his role in being a game manager for the Panthers, going 5-1 in his first 6 games as a starter. However, a midseason collapse would see the Panthers not win a game for the rest of the 2019 season. In 2020, they decided to roll with Teddy Bridgewater, an XFL legend PJ Walker, who gave them no long-term answer and hope for the Panthers. The next season, they would trade for Sam Darnold, who would start the season off 3-0, but in typical Panthers David Tepper era, they would finish the season 5-12. In 2022, they decided to test a new experiment, and they traded for Baker Mayfield, who went 1-5 and would be released mid-season, allowing PJ Walker and Sam Darnold to spend time splitting games in another consecutive losing season. And finally, the infamous trade for Bryce Young, giving up arguably top 10 wide receiver DJ Moore along with 2 first and second round picks. Now, hindsight's 2020, and Young was forced into the worst situation in football. And how can you predict Stroud to have the rookie season that he had last season? However, the last 4 years where the Panthers would have an above average defense felt wasted with the internal revolving door they had at quarterback for years. At number 3, we have Cam Newton's constant shoulder injuries that started in 2016. In a 2020 YouTube video posted by Cam Newton himself, he stated that the last time he was fully healthy was the 2016 season. In a December 2016 game against the San Diego Chargers, Newton would suffer a partially torn rotator cuff in his throwing shoulder after throwing an interception. He would re-injure his throwing shoulder after a 6-2 start of the season 2018, which saw the Panthers losing 6 straight games, deactivating Newton for the final 2 games of the season to allow him to have surgery that offseason. Newton would state that in 2020, when he signed with the Patriots, was the first time he's felt fully healthy since that injury, and we saw how his arm played out this season. He could not throw the football. This injury also affected his running style, as he said that instead of lowering his right shoulder and run right through a defender, he would have to be cautious and switch to his left shoulder and go down during some plays. At number 2, we have Luke Kuechly's reoccurring concussions. It doesn't help having an MVP caliber quarterback that couldn't stay on the field. But what about a depoy level player that just couldn't see the field either? This was what happened with Luke Kuechly. Kuechly retired at the early age of 28 during the peak of his prime. However, the constant concussion woes ended his potential legendary career early, sadly. It all started with a concussion during that 15-1 season, early in the season, which was followed by a torn labrum in the final game of the regular season that same season, which he played through the injury and eventually would wait until the offseason to have surgery. His next injury would come through a grade 3 concussion that he would suffer in week 11 against their rival, the New Orleans Saints. And it wouldn't stop here, as Kuechly would suffer another concussion in a week 6 loss against the Philadelphia Eagles. Eventually, in 2020, Kuechly would sadly step away from the game early and help to raise awareness about traumatic brain injuries. Losing a franchise cornerstone so early in his career is brutal, especially at the elite level performance that Kuechly played at for his whole career. And finally, at number 1, we have David Tepper's terrible ownership as the owner of the Carolina Panthers. Ever since David Tepper bought the Panthers back in 2018, it seems like they cannot get anything right. From terrible coaching decisions, terrible front office hires, and the horrible drafting and offseason moves, Tepper hasn't gotten anything right in Carolina. In his first 2 seasons as the owner of the Carolina Panthers, Carolina would see 2 midseason collapses in back-to-back seasons. While most of the blame cannot be put on Tepper for the collapses, Carolina just hasn't been able to figure it out since. The Panthers would start the 2018 season 6-2, but after an injury to Cam Newton's previously mentioned throwing shoulder, Panthers would only win 1 more game this season, ending their inaugural season with Tepper under the helm 7-9. Their second season would show similar signs. After an 0-2 start and letting Kyle Allen start in week 3, Panthers would see themselves at 5-3, competing for the top spot in the NFC South thanks to Christian McCaffrey's amazing offensive season. However, after week 9, this squad wouldn't win another game that season. And besides all the the collapses, this team has been in a rebuilding mode for what seems to be the past couple of years, and we've already gone somewhere over the failures in the draft they've had while having top 10 picks in the draft, which seems ever to be season. And this is a moral point for the future, but the way ownership has treated Bryce Young has been super unfair. First off, the reports coming out that head coach at the time and quarterbacks coach at the time, Josh McCown, wanted to trade up for the number 2 pick to draft CJ Stroud the whole time, coming out isn't great for your quarterback's confidence. So when you insist on this quarterback and then you fire the coaches and fire the support system you give him, that's just not good. On top of the fact that they didn't even want Bryce Young in the draft. Like, how do you think Bryce Young feels about that? On top of an already horrible rookie season, finding out that the team that drafted you didn't even want you in the first place and they wanted the man who won Rookie of the Year doesn't help. And how about firing your head coach and quarterbacks coach midway throughout your rookie season? Like, come on, Tepper. It's sad to see such an entertaining roster fade away like this, but at the end of the day, football is a business, and if you can't follow the trends of what is happening in the game today, you will be left behind. The Carolina Panthers' journey from near perfection to their current strugglers serves as a stark reminder of the unforgiving nature of professional sports. From Cam Newton's injuries to Luke Kuechly's premature retirement, this team has been plagued by setbacks. Ownership changes, quarterback instability, and the front office missteps have compounded their challenges as well. As the Panthers confront their past mistakes, they face an uncertain future, but their story is a cautionary tale highlighting the importance of an adaptation and foresight in the ever-evolving landscape of the NFL.